Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it, Johannes. Yeah. So I like to start these off by asking you if you have a story of an early memory of how sound moved you. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Basically, look, I grew up in late 80s, early 90s. I mean, grew up when I was a child, okay? A young infant, late 80s, early 90s. And
Oh
what I
yeah, such an
always,
infant. Yeah.
yeah. And what I loved back in the day is when I heard like electric guitars somewhere or rock and roll in general. I don't know. I think I recall when I was a child, I said like this. I called it rock and roll, but what I was basically referring to was like Chuck Berry, this kind of stuff, like the old school rock and roll, the way the guitar sounded and everything, the rhythm. That's something which really it talked to me, so to say. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I think a lot of us have early memories of how the
Hmm.
radio worked for
Yeah.
them. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember going to sleep. It was really hard for me when I was a kid. Like I'm talking like, 7, 8, that,
Hmm.
age. And I used to always have the radio on. And the
Oh,
radio was on to a station here in Toronto called CKEY, which played oldies. And at the
yeah.
time, this was like Nat King Cole and the like,
Hmm.
right? And I loved it. that
Cool,
was
cool.
that was what I grew up on. I just not a regular kid. So yeah, I totally get that radio can be a really big influence on our early sound experiences. Definitely. Yeah. So you got interested in sound and then you got into the auto industry. So how did that happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, I always wanted to be a musician. I played guitar. I still do. I should play it more, but yeah, I started with the acoustic guitar, picked up an electric guitar later on. I also had like a keyboard as a kid, which I'll be honest, I mainly used for prank calls. Um, yeah. But
Okay.
but later on, when I was an adult, I also had piano lessons and learned about music theory and everything. And I did a bachelor's degree in multimedia art, major in audio back in Austria, and then did a master's degree. That's like 12, 13, 14 years ago in Ireland in music technology. And at the time, I already figured out that those rockstar dreams probably not come to fruition because you see where the music industry is going. I mean, where it's now, but like 15 years ago or 20 years ago, you could already get a feeling
Oh
you're
yeah.
probably not going to make real money with music or with being a star or whatever, like pop music, rock music.
It's
Um,
hard. It's a lot
I mean,
harder, I think,
yeah,
than people give it
yeah.
credit for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, but also there's more possibilities like opportunities. You can record a record at home nowadays. You couldn't 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it changed. Like everything changes with technology, society. But long story short, I figured out I'm not going to become a rock star, unfortunately. And and I still do. I love computer games. And I thought, hey, maybe I can become a composer. I think this was also a big dream of a lot of young musicians 10, 15 years ago. Hey, let's become the next Hans Zimmer, whatever. Movies,
Sure.
movies also declining. Now you got Netflix and everything. So movie industry also almost dead. So
Well, they
we,
still need composers. The problem is, are they
sure,
paying what they used to? I don't think
exactly.
so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, video games were the big thing. But then, as you can hear, I'm from Germany. Fortunately, I'm not there anymore. But back when I finished my master's in Ireland in music technology, this was right after the economic recession. So in Ireland was hit pretty hard by the economic recession. So I had to go back to Germany. I would have loved to stay, but no computer game jobs in Ireland. And funny thing, in Germany also no computer game jobs because Germans they they like computer games, but they were never the creative kind. They never believed in opening gaming studios. I mean, nowadays there are a few, but again, we're talking 15 years ago, 13
Yeah.
years ago, whatever. It was all pretty new for Germans. As we all know, Germans love to engineer, to make cars, build cars. It's also changing nowadays. But
Yes.
yeah,
We'll get into that.
yeah, cool. And yeah, I had actually my father knew somebody, a business contact. His son was working at BMW, not in the sound team or acoustic team, but he gave me a contact. And then I had a meeting there, and I thought this is about an internship or something. I had no idea why I was there actually at the time. But after the meeting, they said, hey, we are looking exactly for people like you, because here everybody has an engineering background in acoustics, which is more like physics and math and everything. But we don't have the people. We don't really have the people like you who are interested in computer game music and sound design, so to say. Music technology, like what I studied in Ireland. And yeah, that's how I ended up in the car industry. That's how I started. My first job was with BMW, working on all the interior sounds. They call them like chimes, the warning sounds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they
What
were,
were the
yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask,
No,
like,
please, sorry.
what were the standards of those kinds of sounds? Like, what were they asking you to do?
Yeah. So basically, at the time, they were just realizing that you could do more than just the basic pling plongs, which again, and this comes with many sounds which surround us in our everyday lives. In the past, they were coming from actual machines, or like there was electrical stuff happening. That's how you get acoustic feedback. And people were just, or companies, brands were just thinking about how can we change this? How can we improve this? We still want to have those sounds, those acoustic feedbacks, but make them nicer, more user-friendly, and more centered about the brand. And at the time, BMW was like, look, we got 3 brands actually instead of BMW, 3, not companies, but brands. They bought Rolls-Royce, they bought Mini, and they were BMW, obviously. And first of all, they wanted to change those pling plongs into something more like BMW-ish, if you can say that.
Well,
And
sure. And they had 3 brands, so why
yeah,
not differentiate the brands between each other with those
exactly.
sounds? Yeah.
Yeah, because there was a short time when you bought a Rolls-Royce, we talk about $500,000 with all the extras fully loaded, you get the same
Wow.
sounds as a BMW, and obviously this can't be happening. And also, if you look at the chimes, but again, this is something the automotive industry does in general. They always talk about their safety, there's regulations. Again, this is Germany. Those are engineers, and it's the automotive industry. They love regulations. You know what I mean? So
Oh,
they
yeah.
said those warning chimes. There's like safety. Like for example, you hear those sounds when you don't buckle up your seatbelt. And they said some people, they don't like to use the seatbelt, but they're supposed to. So they said, hey, make it a nice sound, but also focus on that. It's not too nice. It's not too gentle.
Sure.
It still needs to motivate people to use that seatbelt, but don't be too motivating, don't be too pushing with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's a tough mix. It's a really tough mix. And then toss in the idea that these are supposed to be luxury cars, and the sounds should also reflect that, right?
exactly.
You'd think. So more luxury in the car, the better the sound should be, you would think.
100%. I mean, yeah, there's a few perspectives from where you can see this. One would be you pay a premium price for a premium car or a premium product in general. So basically, if you just look at the numbers you pay for people like me at BMW now doing this, but then also what you mentioned, you're buying a premium product, you're expecting a premium experience. And obviously sound, and it can be, you can relate this to every field or to every part of the car. You want a premium experience. Means every part, every piece of the experience or of the car, so to say, somebody needs to put some brain into it. And that's what they're doing with the sounds. Yeah,
You'd think they'd plan a little. I mean, I think they obviously do. I don't think they would sell such high-end cars if they didn't have the technology to make it worthwhile, because people wouldn't buy otherwise, right?
Exactly.
But So, but then you went from BMW to electric vehicles. So what was the transition there?
Yeah. I mean, basically, BMW was fun and everything. I've after BMW, I worked for a short period, I think like around a year for a toy industry, but for a toy company in the toy industry. But they made high-end toy, again, high-end, but it's Germany, you know what I mean? They made like model trains for collectors. And
Oh,
again,
wow.
this
Okay.
is like the people who buy this stuff, and it's like those toys or trains, they cost over $1,000.
Oh, they are not toys.
Yeah,
I know
I call
people
them
who have.
toys.
It's
There
not
you
a
go.
toy.
And the kind of funny thing about this is the customers, they're even more crazy, more about the details, even more than about the people who bought the BMWs or Rolls-Royce.
Oh
So
yeah, they're
those people,
replicas.
yeah,
They're meant to be replicas.
exactly.
So
So
yeah.
my job at the time was to make sure, and again, it's almost impossible, but it worked somehow, that those model trains need to have the same sound or the same experience than the real trains, which if you look
Ooh.
at a steam train, is pretty hard because those model trains, they usually have the same speakers as you have in your phone or in your laptop. So
Yeah.
how can you have like the bass of a steam train? But yeah, that's what I did. And but again, I felt like, oh, I want to go back into the car industry. I mean, I love toys. Like I said, I love video games. I think toys are in a similar category,
Sure.
but still, cars and high-end cars, they're still like, I felt more connected to the product, if that makes sense. So
Mhm.
luckily, I went back, and luckily I had the opportunity to went back into the car industry. And what I did after that is I worked at AMG, the sports car brand of Mercedes, and what they were doing at the time and nowadays, or also at the time, every car manufacturer is doing this. So you probably know the engines are getting smaller. It's called downsizing because to environment emission laws. So what they do is, but they're still fast. They still have the horsepower and the performance and everything,
Mhm.
but you lose a lot of sound. So what they do is they play engine sound through the interior speakers. You don't really, as a customer, you're not supposed to get the idea. And they do it in a very smart way, I'll be honest about it. And that's something I did for a few years. I did a part-time MBA while I was doing this. I went to a tier one supplier called Harman, actually the leader in car audio, market leader. That's what they say. And and I did some program management there. And to answer your original question, as you can see, I can talk for hours about this.
That's okay. That's what we're
Okay,
here
cool,
for.
cool,
We are here for
appreciate it.
this. So yes.
Cool. I had an old Camaro actually, which very rare car back in Germany. I never saw the same car on the streets in Germany, but this car was too old to drive it to work every day or to use it as a daily driver. And I wasn't in the financial position that I could have like a collection of cars. So I had to sell the car and get a new one. And this was 4 or 5 years ago or something. And it was the right time to go electric. I was like, should I buy another car like this, like the Camaro? That's not why spend so much money on something which is a relic from the past, let's be honest.
Well, at least if you're in Germany, you can take it on the Autobahn. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
elsewhere,
eh,
there's nowhere to drive that
True,
car.
true, true. And I did, I'll be honest, I did. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I thought, hey, look, it's the right time. Let's go electric. Also, because I worked in the auto industry, I felt like I should have a product like this, even if it's going to cost me more, it's going to create more trouble, which it actually didn't. So I bought a used Tesla from the Netherlands, brought it to Germany from Tesla, but still used. This was like the cheapest way in, I think this was 2018, 19, to get your hands on a car like this. So I did this, and yeah, when driving the car, I mean, the cars are super fast. Electric cars, obviously, everybody knows this. You got all the technology, you got your Spotify built in, you got this huge screen and all this stuff, but there's no sound. And uh, yeah, I was basically missing the sound. I had the Camaro before. When I worked at Mercedes AMG, I drove all their cars because it was part of my job. So for me, it was like, um, hey, look, there's no sound in this car to begin with, means we could have any sound in this thing. So, and as this is something I basically did as a job, I started tinkering. I started the prototyping on my laptop with some sound prototyping software. And then I thought about, hey, we need a speaker. And obviously, I'm not a speaker expert. It's something I just read a lot and figured out on my own. But the bigger the speaker is, the bigger the housing of the speaker. Usually, the more sounds you get, the more Yeah, it's acoustics, you know what I mean? And so I had the idea, let's put like a guitar speaker type of speaker into this Tesla, basically into the front. You got this front compartment, which in this I had an old Model S, was very big. Nowadays they're a bit smaller, those front compartments. And that's how the whole thing started. I started tinkering around with my prototype software on my laptop. I could exchange the sounds. So I could just load new sounds in. Means basically I was not bound to one sound experience or one engine sound, if you want to call it that. And I felt like after a while, hey, if I'm enjoying this, other people could enjoy this too. And also
Good
the
point.
way, yeah, and the way I did it, obviously, because the car was super expensive, I was actually still paying it off. I didn't drill any holes into the car. You know what I mean? It was not like an old car, like a junkyard car, and I wanted to restore it. So I was
Yeah.
very careful what I'm doing. Means the system I built or the idea of the system was not really like, I wasn't really interfering with the car or altering anything at the car. I could still take the speaker and the software out, and the car is like in its original condition. And that's how I, yeah, that's basically how I started thinking about, hey, let's get some sound for those electric cars.
So this is called glide sphere or
Yeah,
is it
glide
glide?
sphere, glide sphere.
Glide
Yeah,
sphere. Okay. So glide sphere then takes the sounds of different types of cars and allows you to put it into your electric car, correct?
correct. So
Okay.
also here, a lot of learning on my end. When
Hmm.
I started with the whole thing, I had the feeling, and I'll be completely honest, I think this also came to my work in the automotive industry, especially in the German automotive industry, probably. Because at the time, all the car brands were like, when like Porsche and so on, or AMG, whatever, when they did electric cars or they tried to do electric cars, hey, we need a sound, obviously, and let's make it like a spaceship. Because everybody was like, oh, it's futuristic, it needs to be a spaceship. It's like a spaceship, which if you think about it, it's not real. It's still a car. It still has, for me,
We're
it looks
still
like a
driving.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's but for them it was, because I had the feeling, I'll be honest, in the automotive industry, everything is so legacy. I mean, the stuff I saw in Germany, everything is so
Sure.
legacy focused, and those electric cars for them, it was like, oh, like a new world, you know, like the
Yeah.
future. I mean, nowadays you say, hey, it's still a car. Only the propulsion system is a bit different, whatever. And
Well,
so
I was just going to say there's differences between what you hear inside the car and what you hear outside the car,
of course,
right?
of course,
So now electric cars, there are regulations that say that they
yeah,
actually do need to have car sounds so that you can
yeah.
know they're coming.
This is also very, I mean, I don't want to say a funny story, but when I worked at BMW, I was in the team and the
Hmm.
sound team. At the time, they were actually working on those sounds, the stuff you're just talking about. This was when they were just releasing their first electric cars, the i3. And the feeling I had from what I was hearing and so on, also at Mercedes AMG and at Harman later on, that those laws, and this is especially big in Europe. I'm not sure how much it's going on here in the US or in other
Hmm.
countries, continents, whatever, but in Europe it's super big because auto is big in Europe, auto industry. It's kind of the auto industries, they have a lot of influence on politics, lobbying, and so on. They
Interesting.
were,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
they were kind of pushing this because, again, they were like, if you look at BMW, Porsche, AMG, and all the high-end sport cars, um, if they were like, hey, they taken away the sound from us with the electric cars, but this is something we put so much time into. We have so much experience. We got tons of people here were the past decades, centuries, whatever, worked on the sound and everything, exhaust sound. And so I had the feeling they were pushing those laws for pedestrians a bit. Because when I was at BMW, they were actually making tests with blind people. But it's not, I mean, BMW made those tests, you know? And then I think they kind of were influencing the laws. And then again, like I said, in Europe, I'm not sure how it is here in the US. I'm not big into politics. Um,
Oh, that's a careful subject.
yeah, I know.
I'm in Canada.
Especially
I'm
this
in
week.
Canada.
Ah, okay,
I'm
yeah.
not getting involved. Like
No,
it's just just not.
especially this
Yeah.
week. But yeah,
Oh yeah. Our
but
politics are boring. I'm actually quite happy about that.
cool. But long story short, I had the feeling that the car companies, especially the legacy car companies, were pushing for, hey, let's get this law out there so we can still work on some cool sounds. which they didn't really, to be honest. They didn't. But hey. Yeah, that's how they, in my opinion, and you can read a lot about this online. That's how they came up with those laws. So if an electric vehicle, especially the newer models, they didn't have this law for older models, but newer models, they need to make a sound to the outside when they are under a certain speed. Because when they exceed or reach a certain speed, you hear them anyways from the sound the tires make on the street, driving on the road. So yeah, that's how this law came in place. But if you look at Tesla, let's be honest, I'm not sure today if they still sell the most electric cars. Also a lot changed there, also politics. We're not getting into that. We're talking about sound here. So
there's different things that are going on here also with the electric vehicle in the first place, because in Europe I can see it being very viable because mostly you're not driving days to get to one place, right? It's a little closer together. When you're talking about North America, and let me say, especially Canada, there's a lot of wide open space in between where that next charging station is going to be. So I think it's been a little harder to get the adoption going in Canada specifically, but in wide open spaces, it's harder to get people to adopt that when your driving range needs to be huge.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.